Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Social media giant Meta is rolling out a new alternative to Twitter. But is the battle for users driving more people offline? Could this be the end of social media as we know it? And following the story of one teen's survival after being lost in the wilderness, we'll talk to an expert on how to stay safe outdoors. I'm Amy Bell, in for Michelle Elliott, and this is BC Today. A woman who worked as an education assistant in Port Coquitlam has been fired. To supplement her teaching salary, she posted adult photos and videos on social media accounts like OnlyFans. And after being fired, she's speaking out about what she calls misconceptions about the platform.
I feel strongly that in this day and age, we should be able to, do what we want, as long as it's not illegal. We're being kind. I'm not hurting anybody. Um, and I think too that there's a lot of misconceptions on the platform of OnlyFans, and it's actually been part of the movement in the evolution of sex work. We saw for years that with Playboy and Penthouse and all those things, these were magazines that were kind of, headed up by men, and the women were not in control. They were not making very much money. The men were capitalizing. But whereas now it's like OnlyFans actually puts women in the forefront where we are in control of the content that we put out.
Well, we're certainly in a moment of upheaval and change throughout the online platforms. Social media started as a way for people to kind of connect across the globe and share information, a bit like a digital water cooler. But companies like Twitter have become almost unrecognizable to those early days. And then others like Google and Meta-owned Facebook are locked in a battle with the Canadian government over Bill C-18. And then you throw in AI into the mix, and the future role of these tech giants remains uncertain. So today we're asking you, what role does social media play in your life? Has your social media use changed, or are you moving away from it completely? Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. For more, we are joined by Andy Barrar. He is a technology and digital lifestyle expert at handyandymedia.com. Hi, Andy. How are you?
I'm good, Amy. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining us. So for listeners who may not be tuned in to platforms like Twitter, what are some of the latest changes of note?
I think a lot of people would have heard that Elon Musk had purchased Twitter about a year ago for $44 billion. And it was kind of an impulse buy at first. We didn't really know that he wanted it. But then he did actually buy it
Right.
and tried to get out of it, but he had to full on buy it. And there's been a lot of changes since. And people have noticed that, this social media company, which was a public company, has gone private. And it's really become Elon Musk's social media company. And he's made some drastic changes. He's cut over half the workforce. Just this last weekend, Twitter may have had their worst weekend ever when they started, people that were using Twitter were getting that they've exceeded their tweet view limit.
Right.
And so this caused a lot of controversy. And so people are kind of wondering, do I stay on Twitter? And then Meta is going to be releasing Threads this Thursday, which is going to be a Twitter alternative. So things are really going to shape up in the social media space in the next coming weeks.
Well, and I mean, is this just a natural progression of social media, or does it really come down to players like Elon Musk dramatically shifting things?
What Elon Musk did was something very interesting. He's trying to make social media as a service. We have software as a service where if you have, say, a Microsoft Word or a Microsoft Office account that you would pay annually or monthly, he's trying to do that with social media. Just like how we would pay monthly for Netflix,
Right.
he wants us to do the same, to be like basically a verified user on Twitter. Now, when he removed the blue check marks from people that are verified on Twitter, he thought a lot of them would sign up to the $8 a month Twitter verification service, but a lot of people haven't. So
Hmm.
he's trying to monetize Twitter, and he's kind of shooting himself in the foot if he's limiting the amount of tweets people can see, because how are you going to attract advertisers if they can't actually see your ads? So it's hard to understand Elon Musk and what he's doing with Twitter right now,
It
but I can tell
does.
you, Mark Zuckerberg is looking at this and salivating and seeing this as a big opportunity for his company, Meta, which really struggled when they changed their name to Meta and
Yeah.
went into the metaverse, which really didn't work out.
No, and it seems like all of these new things that, Musk or Zuckerberg trying, they're failing miserably. But as you said, they're launching Thread. Do you think that it could be a viable alternative to Twitter? Because we've seen things such as Mastodon come up, but it's very, I would say, not user friendly in terms of the sign up process. Could this really be a direct challenger to Twitter?
Could. It remains to be seen, but the power that Meta has, and they're going to actually call it an Instagram app. So if you're an Instagram user, you can easily use your Instagram handle and get this new Thread app on Thursday, and it looks and feels just like Twitter. The interesting thing, Amy, for this to actually take off, Meta is going to have to attract the influencers out there, the celebrities, the social media content creators
Hmm.
out there, to try to get them to move away from Twitter onto this new Thread app. That remains to be seen, because we have to understand Meta has also tried to get into the dating world with Facebook dating. And
Hmm.
I don't think, well, at least I don't know anybody that's found love on Facebook
No.
that way. So not every product they put out is a hit. But this one, there's an appetite out there for an alternative to Twitter. And you mentioned Mastodon. That didn't really work out because, as you said, it wasn't user friendly. I'm a tech guy. I had trouble using it. So I kind of realized that it wasn't going to take
Right.
off like maybe people thought it would.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned the influencers because I've sort of been watching for that, and through my work even, I'm fairly active on social media, at least as an observer. But I've been waiting to see that sort of shift from those sort of super users, those big influencers, and I've yet to see anybody throw their weight behind any of these new platforms. So it is interesting to see if Thread is going to be the one that could actually do that. Um,
I
Sorry.
wouldn't be surprised if they actually reach out directly to these influencers, like say Meta, which they know, like someone like say the Kardashians, if they would make some kind of partnership to try to get them to lure their fans onto this new platform.
Mm,
That very well could happen.
okay. Yeah, I am surprised it hasn't happened yet. But there's that whole issue too. If they're reaching out to an influencer, you would assume there might be money involved, so people might not trust that as much.
Exactly. And if you watched Elon Musk lately on Twitter, he's actually trying to attract influencers, and he's saying he's going really big on video, doing these long
Yeah.
format videos that he says stuff that would normally get flagged on, say, YouTube and on other video platforms. He's like, hey, we will take everything. Or we'll take all long format videos, which is different from the Twitter that we remember. When they introduced videos, it was only up to maybe about a minute or 2 minutes for non-verified users. But again, if you pay for that monthly subscription, you could have videos over 10 minutes long. And he's really doing that for those content creators. So all of these social media companies realize you got to attract the content creators because they have huge audiences and they will go wherever these influencers go when it comes to the
Okay.
different platforms of social media.
So really, I mean, that's key is they have to just get that direct influence. I wonder too with Meta. I have teenagers and they think it's quite adorable that mom still goes on Facebook. It's just not something that younger generations are using anymore. So does that association with Meta and with Facebook sort of give Threads a little bit of I guess, a negative connotation at all, or are they far enough apart from each other now?
It's tough, like when Facebook first started, and you probably remember this, Amy, people were connecting with their old high school friends, and it was really
Right.
about building that, reconnecting with people. But Facebook is pretty old when you talk about social media companies. And like you mentioned, it's now used by older demographics.
Hmm.
But what they were smart about doing was creating Facebook Messenger, because a lot of people who try to leave Facebook, maybe younger people, they still have an account because of the Messenger aspect.
Ah,
And
okay.
then they went out and bought Instagram. And Instagram also has their messaging app.
Right.
Then they went out and bought WhatsApp. WhatsApp has their messaging. So no matter what Meta does, you're likely communicating and using their platforms, whether you're on Facebook, like you say your grandparents might be on, but even if you're not, you still are a Facebook customer one way or another.
Right. Okay. So we're all in the metaverse, whether we want to or not. Uh,
Absolutely. They have over 3 billion users. So yeah,
yeah.
they're still a big player. But like I said, when they went all in on the metaverse, changed their parent company to Meta, it
Yeah.
hasn't really worked out for them. So they need a win. If
They do.
Meta needs a win, Threads could be it, because there is an appetite for an alternative to Twitter.
Okay, that's interesting. So, and that's coming out, I believe, Thursday. That's sort of we'll just wait and see. I guess the first few days would really be a sign of whether or not it's taking off.
Exactly. Yeah, I will be, I try to limit my social media use, Amy, but on Thursday, I will be watching very closely to see how many people, especially Twitter users, power Twitter users,
Hmm.
who have said for long that they are going to leave. They want to leave. They're sick and tired of the platform, but there has been no alternative, viable alternative. This could be it. But remains to be seen. So all eyes will be on this new Thread app come Thursday.
Okay, we'd love to get impact or any ideas or thoughts from our audience. You can call us anytime here, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690. What role does social media play in your life? How has your social media use changed? And are you moving away from it already? We're joined with Andy Barrar. I'll also just read an email that we have received from Jolene. And Jolene writes, in October 2020, I decided to permanently delete all my social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. I was concerned about my privacy, including protecting my personal data. And I found I was wasting time on the sites. It was a shock at first when I quit. I felt disconnected, but that feeling eventually subsided. My mental health has improved. I read more books now. I have no plans to return. This isn't the first time I've heard somebody say it was sort of like detoxing after they got off social media, and then sort of reclaimed parts of their lives and feel so much better. Are we seeing more and more people turning away from social media completely? Is that sort of heyday gone for now?
Yes, it's a small amount because it runs so much of our lives, especially with the communication aspect, as I mentioned.
Right.
Why a lot of people keep their accounts, and that was kind of strategic by the social media platforms to enable messaging within their platforms. However, one thing is for certain, if you look at any research, Amy, the more social media use you do, the more mental health issues you have. Almost a direct correlation. It's not causation, but you do know that. And anybody that I talk to, Amy, I'll meet people and they'd be like, I have no social media profile whatsoever. And my first response is, you must be so happy. And they're like, yes, it's great. I love it.
Wow.
And I kind of envy them, but being a tech guy, I have to be in this platform. So by nature of my job, and you in media as well,
Yeah.
understand that you kind of have to be there. But the people that have an option to not be there, they are very, very happy. I just think about, like, when we're older, people are going to ask us, like, what was life like before the internet? And I'll tell you, Amy, it was great. It had
It
a
was
great
awesome.
childhood
It was so
before the
simple.
internet came on the scene. Yeah, it was such
It's
a simpler time.
it was a simpler time, and I think it's true in my industry. With news, we are plugged in, we are connected, we have an onslaught of information. But we saw throughout the pandemic and the U.S. Elections, Twitter especially was a huge driver of misinformation that really spread amongst people. Um, and for me, I think that was when I realized this is not harmless. This is a dangerous tool that's being put in the wrong hands of a lot of people. Are there more people perhaps now, I guess, seeing it as not some wonderful way of communicating, but also something that can potentially have huge and dangerous ramifications?
No, the one thing you have to look about with social media, Amy, is you have to understand all these companies, the one thing they want more than anything else is your attention.
Right.
They are designing these apps to keep you engaged. And Elon Musk, it's very interesting. I'm watching all the changes he's doing on Twitter. One thing that he did is if you're watching a video on Twitter, say on your smartphone, and you swipe up, it'll just play another video that's on that Twitter timeline. And
Yes.
it looks very, very similar to TikTok. And so they're taking playbook strategies from each other and incorporating them into their platforms. But the reason they're doing this is they're trying to keep us on those platforms. They know how many times you open up Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And when you go off script, say you're on vacation, you just don't open it up like you
Yeah.
do normally every morning. They'll start sending you push notifications to lure you back in. So one of my biggest suggestions for people who want to have a social media presence but don't want it to take over their life is to remove all of those push notifications from the social media platforms, because they're trying to lure you back in. They know your habits better than you do. And when you go off script, they're going to try to get you back in, because that's how they make their money.
Exactly. They're not playing fair. We'll be joined now by one of our audience members, Brian in Agassiz. Hi, Brian. Thanks for calling in.
What a great topic, finally. It's so good.
It's a hot topic, that's for sure. And so what's your experience with social media? Where are you
Well,
standing on it?
you know, we're supposed to get our, supposed to be guided in life by people who are actually have education, training, experience, and all you hear about is a TikTok influencer, a Twitter influencer, a social media influencer. They have no training, they have no experience, they have no background. They just are popular because they dance or they do outrageous things. And suddenly people's lives are being guided by this instead of going out and making something of yourself. We're counting on complete strangers, and we're also guided by complete strangers who comment on our posts and what we say or our TikTok videos, and they control what we do. I don't know these people. They live in, I don't know where, somewhere USA, and yet I'm influenced by that. Get out and rescue kittens. Work at a soup kitchen. You don't need, we all are searching for this self-gratification. Look at me, look at me, look at me. I've been told I'm special my whole life, and I'm an adult, and now I realize, oh, I'm not special. But this stranger in Russia will call me special if I do a stupid dance on TikTok. It's ridiculous.
No, and I think that's a very valid point. But how do you feel about, say, throughout the course of the pandemic, we had doctors who were trying to educate young people that were on social media and sort of meet them where they were. What about using it as a tool to get very well-educated people's messages out?
Well, the problem with that, great idea, but for the 20% of the content that is from an expert who's actually educated, you have 80% of the fake news and the guy who lives in the burned out bus down in the corner who is the expert on how I should live my life, and that's who's influencing me because there's no criteria behind it. That's the problem. We've taken the people out of society, and social media, who really have no interest in my personal well-being, are controlling people. I was on social media for such a short time, and you know what? It didn't change my life. I just thought, this is ridiculous. And it whenever I hear a social media influencer or a TikTok influencer, I want to throw up.
Well, we don't want you to do that, but I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for calling in, Brian. And Andy, he did bring up a good point, and that's with AI. And how does that come into play with all of these changes that we're seeing?
The thing about AI, artificial intelligence, it's based on data. It needs data to become better at what it needs to do. And so social media is a treasure trove of data. And one of the logics or reasonings Elon Musk said that he put a limit on how many tweets you could see per day was that he was afraid that the AI bots out there were what's called data scraping Twitter. So they're taking everything on Twitter and taking that data, and these third-party companies with their AI machine are feeding that data into their AI to build an AI product. From there, they're going to go and sell it. Elon Musk is not happy about this. He wants to own that Twitter data. But that data is actually our data because we are the ones that are creating that data. So it really comes down, Amy, to data. And he was talking about the whole influencer culture. And what's disheartening at least for me, is in the 80s and 90s, you would go to a classroom of kindergarten kids and you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they'd be like, I want to be a doctor. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a pilot.
Hmm.
You go into that same classrooms today, they want to be a TikTok star. They want to be a YouTube star. They want to be unboxing toys. And it just shows, in such a short time, how much social media has become part of our lives. And a big question for a lot of parents out there is what age do you allow your kids to have social media? Because I
Exactly.
guarantee you, if you try to ban it, they have a friend who already has it. And it's very, very tough, because we grew up without social media in our childhoods, just
Yeah.
imagine what life would have looked like if you were tweeting when you were like 16 or 17. And there's a lot of kids don't realize everything they put on the internet is going to live there forever. And when they're going to get a job in the future, you best be sure the HR department is going to be Googling their name and seeing what comes up.
Well, and I recommend that and say that to my children all the time, that I'm so happy that I had the grace to mature without it being broadcast to the world. And they don't have that anymore. They've lost that sort of trial period where they can make mistakes that not everybody will know about, and that will have such a huge impact for their futures. And I understand there are great, wonderful ways to stay connected with people and to gain access to information on social media, but it really is quite dangerous for a lot of children to be on it so much. I'll read an email from Randy. He writes, during my second career as an agent and artist manager for 11 years, I worked on the transition to MySpace, to Facebook, and then Twitter. Yes, MySpace, who almost forgot. The recording and performing artists my partner and I represented needed the platforms, but I didn't. I recognized the benefits, but also the risks. Most importantly, I saw the potential for hackers to use the content for illegal gain. So I'm pretty current on the digital landscape, but prefer happily to be a specter. How do you think the changing social media landscape will impact artists and professionals like Randy?
Oh, that's very interesting because when I was in grad school in business, this was being back 2006, 2007, my thesis statement was the digital music industry and how they could use these new online platforms. And at
Oh,
that
okay.
time, Facebook just kind of hit the scene. And my entire thesis was like, you don't really need to sign to a major label. You could build your own community with these new online platforms like Facebook. And after I left that thesis, Amy, and graduated, I remember sitting with my classmates. And I told them, I was like, people are going to get paid to manage Facebook profiles for businesses. And everybody in my class laughed at me. And I actually moved to Toronto, to a city that I'd never been to get a job that didn't exist. But after doing that thesis and seeing the growth of these emerging artists and how they're building these online communities,
Right.
I was convinced that this was a huge platform that kind of decentralized everything. So if you were good, you could get an audience. And sure enough, they have now a position called community managers where you manage profiles. And of course, artists have those community managers as well. So it
Right.
just shows you the power of social media, but there's also inherent dangers. And you can see that with the whole influencer culture of people whose whole like self-worth and identity is how many followers they have. And then that's why Instagram, you might remember, eliminated the amount of likes you could
Yeah.
see because people were their whole validation was based upon every like that they would get
Yeah.
on Instagram. So they had to take that away. That just shows you how dangerous a platform like Instagram can be for people's mental health. And this is just part of our society right now. So you wonder, what is social media going to look like in 10, 15 years? My hope is more and more people just log off. Being a tech guy, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here, but the more I think about it, I think sometimes, Amy, I should just retire and become a farmer because I do remember what life was like before the internet.
It's a
And when
simpler
the internet
time.
came, when the internet came, we didn't even use our real names. We all had aliases.
I
And
know.
now people are posting what they have for breakfast. It just shows just how far that arc has gone in a lifetime. The lifetime's not even over yet.
I know. I can only imagine what the next stage is, but you'll have your garden. I'm going to just quit and raise baby goats, I think, but we'll see what happens. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy. It was great to talk to you.
My pleasure, Amy. Thank you.
That was Andy Barrar, a technology and digital lifestyle expert at handyandymedia.com. And coming up, do you know what to do if you're lost in the wilderness? We'll have some life-saving tips and tricks right after the 12:30 news with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Another organization has added its voice to those calling for an end to the BC port strike. Fertilizer Canada says the two sides must reach a quick agreement to avoid what it says will be a devastating shutdown. The organization says the job action will damage Canadian trade and this country's reputation as a reliable supplier. Investigators believe a fire in Vernon that badly damaged several businesses might have been deliberately set. Crews were called at around 2:30 this morning. People living in a nearby apartment building were ordered to leave their homes because of the thick smoke. There's no word on any injuries. And a Maple Ridge education assistant is consulting with her union after she was fired after posting revealing photos on her OnlyFans account. The single mother says she used the extra income to help pay her bills. The district called her conduct egregious and accused her of linking the website and the school environment in interviews. And now the forecast on the North Coast. Sunny this afternoon with a high of 19. Highs up to 24 with smoke and sunshine in the Peace. In the central interior, a mix of sun and cloud with local smoke and a high of 25. Highs all the way up to 30 with sunshine and a chance of thunderstorms in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, sunny with local smoke and a high of 30 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, hazy this afternoon with some sunshine and highs reaching 30 inland. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Amy with BC Today.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome back to BC Today on CBC Radio. Online, you can listen live at cbc.ca/BC or on your CBC Listen app. I'm Amy Bell, in today for Michelle Elliott. A teen who went missing more than 2 days ago in Golden Ears Park last week says she is still recovering from the trauma of her survival ordeal. 16-year-old Esther Wang was hiking with fellow cadets when she became separated from her group, leading to a 40-person search effort. In a letter posted online, Wang detailed how she got lost and her efforts to get back to the trailhead. Once I realized that the rest of my group was no longer in front of me, I tried to turn around, but I tripped and fell down until I reached a flatter part of the mountain. Scared and lonely, I curled into a ball and I tried to stay as calm as possible. Soon I started to hear whistles and noises that sounded like a signal. I started to climb the mountains toward the noises. However, I could not locate the signals. She spent that night and the next on the mountainside before making it back to the trail, and for many of us, it was a reminder to brush up on safety tips before heading out on your next hike. We want to hear from you now. Have you ever been lost on a hiking trail or in the backcountry? What do you want to know about how to proceed if you do get lost? Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also join us by email, bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me live in studio now is Brent Hillier, an outdoor educator with the Canada West Mountain School. Hi.
Hi there.
Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Such an amazing story of survival.
Yeah, it really is.
I think we were all, so hopeful that she would be found. And when she walked out on her own, it was just such an incredible feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Have you yourself ever gotten lost on a trail or through one of your adventures?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a couple different versions of lost. Yeah. And I'm happy to say that I've never needed to be searched for by search and rescue. I've certainly had those moments of being slightly misplaced, but if you have the tools, you can usually find your way. But it means having those tools and orientating yourself.
That's just it. And it's very disorienting. And even if it's just for a second or a minute or two that you think you've lost your group or lost your trail, it's incredibly difficult to think straight, to know what to do.
Absolutely.
So what are some of those tools, and what is sort of the top priority when you're in that situation where you're like, hey, I don't know where I am and nobody knows where I am?
Yeah, what we always try to teach kids is we say hug a tree, and what we're kind of getting at there is we want people to stay put.
Okay.
Anybody that's lost and moving is incredibly difficult to find. You know, we want a stationary target. Rescuers want a stationary target, and so sit tight, and that's really the key thing. That is unfortunately really hard for people to do who are lost because they want to help themselves, and that seems like they're not helping themselves.
Well, and I think that the first instinct, especially, you know, if you were in a group such as Esther, is she felt they were, you know, just minutes away from her, that she would just have to, you know, take one turn and they would be. But obviously, as we now know, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
What are some things, though, that hikers can keep in mind, sort of, we'll backtrack, to prevent being that situation where you do get lost or you aren't sure where your group has gone? What should you do before you even set out?
Yeah, I think there's moments. A lot of us will take on leadership roles when we're out in the backcountry, and I work as a professional guide, and so I'm always taking on those leadership roles. But a lot of times you're out with people that are perhaps just organic leaders, or you're out with a group of friends. One of the key moments to try to really be careful of your group is when you leave a summit or a peak, and the reason for that is you can walk a very short distance but go any way off of the compass. Essentially, your group can head south and you can end up accidentally heading north, and then you're put on a completely different part of the mountain.
Right.
And so really making sure that everybody is together when you leave that summit is kind of a really critical point. Summits are kind of our destination, so maybe we're kind of on a little bit of a high of like, oh, that was beautiful, and then, you know, okay, we're leaving now, and maybe that group check doesn't always happen there. So that's a big one, is just making sure you've got everybody in that first little moment when you leave the summit.
Okay. Even though you might be, I think sometimes people, they reach a summit, they're exciting, they're maybe a bit tired, and then they're just not being as, I guess, careful or as watchful.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think too, we just spoke about sort of social media and that dominance and pervasiveness. Have people become perhaps maybe even a little too reliant on cell phone technology or their phones to navigate them? Because I know that, you know, Esther had said her phone did die. She eventually lost it. So, you know, that wasn't going to be a help to her.
They're becoming more reliable, and they are going to maybe someday get to a point where that is the key tool that you need.
Okay.
But they're not quite there yet. The GPS technology that's on phones, although it doesn't require a cell phone signal to be utilized, it's not 100% accurate. It can fail you. I've had situations where even though I've downloaded the maps ahead of time, so I have access to them offline, that's the moment that my cell phone decides it needed a software update and something didn't work, and now I don't have those maps.
Right.
So you need to have a paper map. You need to kind of know what to do, especially if you're going to go somewhere that's a little bit more remote. We have a lot of trails here on the coast, but they can be overgrown, they can be confusing, and they're not always well marked. And so even though you might be intending to stay on trail, you should have that map with you and know how to use it.
Well, and that's it. That's key too, is knowing how to use it. We actually just got an email from Rick in Victoria, and he writes, "We leave marking tape on new trails, aka survey tape tied to a branch a few hundred meters apart or where a turn is necessary." Is that a good practice to get into?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I hesitate though because
you didn't look completely.
I know. And the problem is that too much marking tape just becomes too confusing, and then we don't really know what's going on. And I've been in very random places in the forest, just bushwhacking or wandering around or doing whatever, and there's marking tape where I have no reason. I don't know why there's marking tape there. And so it can be challenging a bit. But definitely there are those confusing intersections, and I would always kind of rely on the locals or rely on search and rescue to kind of know where those spots are and make sure that they're clearly marked.
Okay. And we obviously want to hear from our listening audience. Have you been lost on a hiking trail or in the backcountry? And what do you want to know about how to proceed if you do get lost? You can call us here at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can also email us at BC Today. And we are speaking with outdoor educator Brent Hillier, and he can answer your questions or speak to any of your concerns. What are your sort of emergency essentials when you're hiking? Your just must-haves?
Yeah, I mean, I always go to those 10 essentials, and we're kind of getting away from calling them the 10 essentials because there's other activities that I do that might want 11 essentials or 12 essentials, but there's kind of 10 core ones there, and water, food, extra clothing, something that you can make shelter out of, something that you can start a fire with. They're all kind of in there, but communication is a key one, and that's where having some sort of a device that can contact emergency help. And whether it's an InReach or a Spot device or a Zoleo, these devices work outside of cell service, and you can communicate directly to search and rescue.
Okay.
And it's huge. It's kind of changed what search and rescue does now. They do a lot less searching and a lot more just rescuing because they know exactly where to go to find somebody who needs help.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what we want to hear. Is there ever, not a danger, but when we hear these stories, I know I have, teenagers, and we were thinking of going out for a hike this coming weekend. But now, after I hear this tale of how easy it was for a teenager to get lost, I suppose it made me a bit nervous because we're not the most avid hikers. Do you worry sometimes that people will shy away or be turned off from some of these unfortunate incidents that maybe aren't that common?
Yeah, I think for the most part, if you're worried about that stuff, you're probably in a really good spot to be prepared and to do the right thing out there. And I think it's the issue with the outdoors is that you don't know what you don't know, and that's how people really get into trouble. When we hear about these incidences, we hear about the things that went wrong, and we don't hear about all the success stories out there. So it's not to say that there's not risk in the outdoors. There's certainly risk out there, but a lot of it is almost perceived in the sense that, like, we have very few, bear encounters in the wilderness, and we have very few people getting lost in the grand scheme of how many people are getting out there. For me, though, you can do so much to prevent any of that stuff from happening, and it just takes being prepared.
Right, and going through the steps and taking time. We do know that at one point Esther fell and she hit her head. How does injury heighten these emergency situations, or sort of hamper somebody's ability to be found or get out or continue with their group?
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. I mean, if you have a concussion, you're not in a good mental state at that point. And I had an incident a couple years ago where I actually hit my head on a hike, and since then, my one hiking buddy that I do a lot of trips with, we've kind of come up with this deal that, like, look, if I slip and fall and hit my head, or you slip and fall and hit your head, I'm not part of the decision-making process anymore. You need to, it's like a concussion protocol out there. You need to pull the plug on me because I'm going to want to keep going, and I might not be assessing myself.
You might not be aware of the issues or the mistakes
and
that you're
for
making.
Esther, like, that's a very scary scenario, right? And it's amazing. It just came out with such a good ending. It's great.
It is great. And I think that as we all read her letter and have heard more details, that maybe wouldn't have been the case. There were so many factors that could have gone other ways. So
Absolutely.
It was pretty incredible story. We'll take a call now from Doug in Vancouver. Hi, Doug. Thanks for calling into BC today.
Nice to talk to you.
Any tips or questions? Are you an avid hiker? Have you ever been lost?
Well, I've been lost without being lost. I've been off trail many times. I'm 80 now, and I still hike. And my trick is that I have a laminated set of Canada Survey maps, so that I take two of them, and I always have the area where I'm going, and then I have an altimeter, and so if I can see where the trail is and I know the altitude where I am, then I know exactly where I am, even though I'm off trail.
So where are some of your favorite places to hike? Where have you been lately?
Oh, my goodness. Pretty much all over BC. I've traveled, hiked a lot up behind Whistler and up in Golden Ears, and I've climbed Mount Rainier 4 times and Mount Baker, and I have done in my younger years a lot of alpine skiing trips.
Well, sounds like you've had a good time in the great outdoors. Thanks so much for calling in.
You're welcome.
All right, take care, Doug. We'll actually take a call now from Brian. And Brian, I believe that you have a couple of questions for Brent.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, I've got 2 questions. Just myself to let you know, I'm a pretty experienced backcountry traveler, backpacking, mountaineering, skiing, etc. So the 2 questions that I was interested in getting Brent's insight on are, number 1, what are some of the common behaviors we see people that are lost do and why they're dangerous? And the second is the value in hiring a guide if you're venturing into the outdoors in an area you haven't been to before. And I mean like other parts of the province or the country or the world even.
Yeah, I think for the first one, the common mistake is not just making that call that like, okay, I'm lost now. And thinking that, you know what, I can get out of this. It's just around that next corner. I just got to get up to the top of this hill. And there just comes to a certain point where you need to just admit that, like, you know what, maybe the trail's just around that corner, but I'm going to be found a lot better if I just stay put. And that's where, you know, getting a shelter built and all those things that we kind of think about when we think about survival, they do certainly help in keeping you warm, but they keep you in one spot. And that's what I would encourage people to kind of focus on is stick to one spot. Search and rescue is incredible in this province. They've got a lot of practice, unfortunately, maybe, but they're good at finding people. But it is, again, hard to find those moving targets. And then for your second question, I certainly can't argue hiring a guide as a professional guide myself. I'd be remiss in not encouraging people to hire guides. But I would also say that I think a lot of people think that hiring guides are for folks that are new to the backcountry. And one of the things here in British Columbia I find especially true with a lot of guides is that we're also educators. And if you've been doing lots of things in the backcountry, but you haven't had any formal training, it might be a great opportunity to hire a guide or take a course so that you can become more of a leader yourself. And something I always do with all of my backpacking programs and survival programs and navigation programs is instill leadership skills with those people, because I unfortunately can't teach the whole province, but I can hopefully teach a few strong leaders that can help out and keep other people safe out there.
Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, take care, Brian. And I think that's an important point to make, that, you know, you obviously can't educate everybody, but if we have enough people that are educated and aware of safety protocols and what to have, there's a greater chance that somebody in a group will actually know what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And maybe come with me, because I don't all the time.
Yeah.
We did have Mary write in, and she says, our rule, if you reach an intersection or fork in the trail, stop and wait for everybody so everyone knows which way you went.
Yeah,
and I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, but I've been in that situation where somebody assumes that you're right behind them. They go left and you go right.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something where, you know, I spend a lot of time with other professional guides, and I take that for granted sometimes. And I have to remember that even if I am out with friends, you know, I do have to put my guiding hat on and just not make assumptions. And just, you know, if you happen to be the one at the very front of the group, you're kind of in that guiding role. And, you know, you should make sure that you're checking off all your boxes and stopping at those intersections and doing shoulder checks and making sure everybody's there.
Well, exactly. And that's it. And I think it's a continual process. You have to just do it throughout. It's kind of similar to when you have little kids with you in the grocery store. They're going to wander off if you don't keep an eye on them. We'll take a call now from Yvonne in Vancouver. I believe, Yvonne, you've got a tale to tell of your time hiking with some friends.
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to tell this story about a time that me and a group of friends got really lost up in Squamish. We were doing High Falls Trail, and there was a big section of the trail that had been washed out by a landslide up at the top. So we'd already been hiking for like an hour and a half, and we had a friend who was going to meet us up at the top with his van, pick us up. So we started hiking up this landslide, and pretty quickly we realized that we weren't really following the trail anymore. We're just scrambling along rocks. And we got... we were going up that for about 45 minutes before we realized that we were pretty freaking lost. And we get to the top, we come to a Forest Service road, and our friend is not there. So we've come out at the wrong part of the trail. And we start walking along the Forest Service road, again, for like an hour and a half, and we realize that we're going the wrong direction. So finally, our friend comes tearing along the corner, and he's just been circling these Forest Service roads for hours looking for us, getting ready to call search and rescue. And, of course, we were all pretty thrilled to have been found because we only packed enough food for like an hour and a half hike. But that could easily have gone a different way if we didn't have somebody waiting for us and looking for us actively.
Right. Well, I'm glad that you did, but that seems like it can be a very common thing. It's very easy to miscalculate and miss that pickup for you, and then you have that panic. That does bring up a good question, though. I think when we talk about getting lost, we always assume it's a singular thing, but what happens if you are lost with an entire group? Do you all stay put? Do you send somebody off and running? How does that work out?
Yeah, I think staying together is really key. And if there is a moment where you're going to separate, you need to really think hard about it and come up with a good strategy. And splitting up always seemed to work really well for Scooby-Doo and the gang, but it doesn't really work out.
Always.
It doesn't really work out well in the backcountry. And so sticking together is probably your best bet. And you're stronger in that group, and you're going to be more easily found as a big group as well.
So it's not necessarily a bad things. And what are some of, I guess, I would call them tips for maintaining your maintaining your orientation so that you're not going around in circles, because that is something that I've heard from other people is, they think they're going one way, they're going the other, they come around the corner and, oh, it's that tree we saw an hour ago. How can you sort of maintain that sense of direction?
Yeah, it takes experience, it takes practice. And one of the things that's great about almost all of us having a GPS in our pocket is that we can practice with some of the more basic tools like a map and a compass. And if we do find ourselves a little bit twisted around and lost, we can pull out our phone and probably get a little blue dot that tells us exactly where we are and figure out. But you need to practice with the other tools, because when that phone fails you, you need to have a backup plan. And then there's just things that you need to just be constantly thinking about as you're moving. And one of the previous callers mentioned an altimeter, and that's a great tool, especially here in the mountains.
And what exactly is that? I think I can guess, but I'm not.
So there's a couple different versions of altimeter, but the best one to use is one that relies on barometric pressure. So as you go up the mountain or down the mountain, it's going to change its elevation based on the air pressure.
Okay.
And it's also affected by storms as well. So I use it in the winter. If it beeps in the middle of the night, it means it might be a really good pow day the next day because there's a storm coming in. And so you do need to reset them. And when I get to the top of a mountain, I'll recalibrate it so it's accurate. But it's a huge tool for me. It's on my wrist, so it's easy to access.
Right.
And I can kind of narrow down where I am on a mountain if I know what elevation I'm at. With a paper map and that, and then I can also use not necessarily a compass, but the direction that I'm traveling, and I'll kind of use it a little bit more of an ish, and so kind of working with the sun a little bit as well. If I plan on traveling south, well, by noon, that sun should be directly in front of me. And if all of a sudden, I'm looking at my shadow, I'm not traveling south anymore. And I need to readdress or reassess what's going on there.
And those are all such simple, basic skills that we should have, but not all of us. I guess just, as you said, we're not in practice with that anymore.
No.
We have forgotten those basic keys.
It's in our DNA. It's there.
Just tap into it. Your ancestors could do this.
Yeah, exactly. We're all here because somebody that we're descended from was strong with these skills.
They could figure out how to follow the sun. We'll just quickly get a call now from Jillian in Port Alberni. Hi, Jillian. How are you?
I am fine. I'm so glad your guest mentioned a paper map because that's what sparked this call. My point is that every member of the group needs to be equally prepared, not just relying on the leader, because you never know who's going to get separated from whom, and the data may go off in one direction and you may be going in the other. What brought that home to me, I'm not in physical condition to go bushwhacking anymore, but I was on a multi-day hike with a supposedly experienced group of outdoors people, and partway through the trail had been damaged by erosion and flooding and whatnot. We're trying to re-find the trail, and it turned out I was the only one of the entire group that had a map. I was a first-time hiker, and it was a rudimentary map in a hiking guidebook, so it wasn't even properly to scale. The group leader had figured that somebody else would bring the map, and everybody else had figured that somebody else would bring the map. So, again, you never know who's going to get separated, and everybody needs to be equally prepared and have equal resources.
And such valid points, and obviously sorry that you were put in that situation, but so glad that you did have the, the foresight to bring that map.
It brought the point home. You cannot rely on anybody else because you don't know who's going to be left alone.
Right, and that's a very fair point. And Brent, I saw you sort of nodding along with her, and it's true. We put people in leadership positions, but we can't put all of our faith in just one person.
Yeah, well, during the winter, I spent a lot of my time teaching avalanche courses, and something that comes out of avalanche accidents is often the group will all identify one person as being the leader that day. And oftentimes that person is unaware that they're even the leader. So they don't know that they have that responsibility. And I think the other thing is you should know what's in your friends' backpacks. I think it's important to kind of do a little bit of a show and tell and have a look at things. And that takes a little bit of planning as well. And sometimes, I'll spend a lot of Friday nights just looking at maps with friends and planning out trips, and maybe trips that we're going to do the next day, or maybe just thinking about things we'll do someday. And just having that preparation period, I think, is very important. And then going out there with people that you know really well and trust. I think that's a big one. And that sometimes is the hardest thing, is to find, folks to go out there with that are like-minded and have a similar risk tolerance to you and comfort level, that kind of thing.
Right. But once you find them, it's great. We'll just take one small call in from Eric. Eric, you have a very good tip that I think we would all love to share. Eric in Lytton, hi.
Hi. I always pack a whistle and a small mirror.
Yes. And what do you use the mirror for?
You can move it back and forth with the sun. If a helicopter's overhead, they might see the flashes.
Perfect. Simple, but effective.
Yeah, that whistle's great. It's great in the winter as well, because the snow on trees can absorb sound quite a bit, so it's going to get a lot more further reach. And then the mirror. I've always been a skeptic on the mirror, and everybody that I talk to, pilots, they say it's true. I'm like, how can you see that from the ground? But it is true. It does work, and so it's something to have. And that's where, I always carry a compass that has a sighting mirror, because it's a better compass to use out in the field. So now it's got that mirror on it, which is great.
Perfect. Well, I thank you so much. I think it's sparked so many conversations in the last couple of days. It's just how to be safe and the ways that people can protect themselves. So thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon. That was Brent Hillier, outdoor educator with Canada West Mountain School. That is our show for today. And my thanks to everyone who joined us and called in. You can always share your thoughts. BC Today at cbc.ca. Download our podcast at CBC Listen app or our Twitter feed at BC Today. I'm Amy Bell, in for Michelle Elliott. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great afternoon. Take care, and I will talk to you again tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll be talking about your first summer job. So join us then tomorrow at 12 o'clock.